Hello, Scott. I'm delighted to be having a second chat with you, the host of Going Into the Story, which the Writer's Digest has named Best of the Best Screenwriting Website. Myself and Steve Evans here.
Hi, Scott. You okay?
Yeah,
Good
I'm doing
to
fine.
good
Yeah.
to touch base with you. So, you in the windy city of Chicago, then I believe. Before we start talking about your script, your screenwriting and teaching and writing, do you have any other hobbies? What you get up to in Chicago?
Well, actually, I mentioned this on social media the last day or so. I didn't mention it during the Writers Guild and Actors strike because so many people were my friends and stuff were dealing with job insecurity. But I got tenure at DePaul University. I teach at DePaul University, and it was elevated to associate professor. So
Right.
that happened over the summer, and that means I'll be in Chicago for the foreseeable future. It's an amazing city. I don't know if you've ever been here, but there's so much going on. The food, the music, the comedy, improvisational comedy got started in Chicago, the whole idea of improv. So yeah, I enjoy going out and experiencing this incredible city. My office is one block from the Art Institute, which is one of the great museums in the world. It's one block from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra headquarters. So, so it's really been a wonderful experience living here, and I just hope to be able to continue to explore the city because it's just a great place to live.
Sounds
Sounds like
divine, Terry,
it
doesn't
does.
it?
Certainly does, yeah. Speaking of divine, can go back in your early in your career, Scott? Can I ask about you did a BA honours degree from the University of Virginia in religious studies, plus a master's degree from Yale in divinity. Did you have aspirations for the priesthood?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a very religious family.
Yeah.
My parents raised me as a Southern Baptist. I was actually dunked, when I can,
Yeah.
they dunk you in the water. Um,
Yeah.
and so, but I guess my interest in it was more existential, frankly. Like, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? My father was an Air Force colonel. He flew B-52s. If you've seen Dr. Strangelove, that was my
Oh yeah.
dad, not the
Wow.
guy flying off to Russia, but he did
Wow,
fly B-52s.
Wow.
You know,
superb. Yeah,
he took me down. We lived in Minot, North Dakota for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's the site of like the most missile silos in the United States. So he took me down into one of those things, and you
Yeah.
tend to think about things like, oh, I don't know, death when you're dealing with stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I have always been interested in those existential questions. But yeah, I was a religious studies major in the honors program at University of Virginia, and I pursued that at Yale Divinity School, a 3-year master's degree, a terminal degree, and my intention was to get a PhD. And my focus was on what we call in academia primitive Christianity,
Oh,
that period of time between Jesus,
yeah.
this social justice warrior,
Yeah.
preaching the apocalypse, and the founding of the church. How did that happen? And but my parents, to their great regret, bought me a guitar when I was 14,
More fun.
and I started playing music and writing songs. And I knew if I didn't pursue that, I would regret it. And so I left Yale. I was going to do 1 year, just see what happened.
Yeah.
And that led me to everything else. I was a musician for 7 years. I did stand up comedy for 2 years. And then that led me to screenwriting. And so, but then I circled back to academia. I'm not teaching religious studies, I'm teaching screenwriting. So,
Okay.
yeah, very strange. That's the way life is. Follow your bliss. That's what Joseph Campbell said. And that's all I've been doing is like pursuing the things that I'm passionate about. And that led me down this path.
Great philosophy.
okay. Moving forward, and this is a subject that's very topical at the minute, actually. Do you think screenwriters, well, in fact, all creative types, musicians, artists, should they be terrified or willing to embrace the advances with AI? Is it scary or,
Oh, it's very scary.
Mm.
yeah?
It's very scary. If I were an actor, I'd be petrified.
Yeah.
I don't think that AI can ever do what writers do. AI will never be able to approximate the nuances and subtleties and complexity of the human experience. I did a whole series on my blog of 5. I chat GPT. I said, okay, so imagine you're David Lynch, and here's a scenario. Write me a scene a la David Lynch, or write me a scene like Indiana Jones. Yeah. And they were terrible. Good. Now, maybe in 2 years, they'll be okay. That's a
scary bit. In 2 years.
Yeah. Or 6 months. But I said to it at one point, I said, okay, you've written me a scene with, I had the prompt for the Indiana Jones thing was pretty funny. I said, all right, imagine, write me a scene in Indiana Jones style where he is on board an airplane, a German World War II, a German plane. They have a nuclear bomb. They're going to drop it on London, and there are 3 Nazi soldiers, and Indiana Jones has to stop this from happening. And so it did a draft, the scene. I was like, okay, but what about Indiana Jones and that kind of fun, humorous side that he has?
Yeah.
So add some lines that he says, and they literally had a line like, "You're as dangerous as schnitzel." It's just terrible, right?
It doesn't quite compute, does it? No.
Yeah.
So, but if I were an actor and it could, take my image and recreate this sort of, that would scare me. But I don't think it can ever replicate what writers do.
Yeah. Last night we had a chat with an audiobook narrator. She's done something like 1,600 titles, and she was saying that, well, in her opinion, she is wary. She's terrified, basically. Audiobook narration. She said, now it's out there now, and it can only improve. It can only get better, and she expects to eventually replace all human narration. I can't see it myself, but I hope I don't see it.
She was talking about 5 years' time, wasn't she?
Yeah,
it could be that advanced by then.
It's very frightening all across the board.
Yeah.
You'd like to think like the people who come up with this would say, let's use this to come up with the treatment for cancer, or to help with psychologically traumatized people as like a therapist type thing.
Yeah.
But it just, because of the nature of capitalism, frankly, it's all about like, how can we commoditize this and make money? And so, it's frightening. This is where I believe it's so important for creative people and storytellers to do what we do, because we can do what it can't do. We can tell stories that it can't create. And that's where humanity's, I don't know, maybe this sounds too much, but survival may lie, is in the ability of people to tell stories that evoke empathy and connection and self-understanding. I really do believe that. I think it's like super important that we now more than ever tell stories that really impact the lives of other people.
Going back to the last chat we had, Scott, I asked you a loaded question. Do you think screenwriters get the credit they deserve? Can I ask that again, but putting it in a different sort of context, to do with the writers' strike? As the Writers Guild, has that achieved the target they were aiming for the strike?
Well, I've been involved in 3 strikes. Like, I broke into the business in 1987. Within a year, I was in the 1988 strike. Yeah. And then there was a 2007 and 2008 strike. And then this most recent one. This most recent one is absolutely the most forward-thinking and progressive and positive results from a strike of the 3. There was one in 1960 where the Writers Guild and the actors went out on strike, and that was hugely important because it established pension and health and residuals. So that was perhaps the most important of the strikes that have happened. But this one was really important because if the Writers Guild had not succeeded, the writing experience in Hollywood, the idea of a writing career, first of all, that would have gone away. I think it would just be like gig economy. You're just going from one gig to the next. Yeah. But the most important thing I can see is that it provided some safety and buttressed the opportunities for young people, the new writers, to come in and have an opportunity to move forward and develop a career. So there was a lot of emphasis put on the part of the negotiating committee, and I think wonderfully so, about the new writers and having opportunities to move forward and guaranteeing that they do have an opportunity to work their way up, and particularly in the TV side, to become staff writers and producers and so forth. So yeah, this was a hugely important strike, and you're seeing this across the board. It's not just the writers or actors, hotel workers and airline industry and food services. I mean, workers around the, at least in North America, are really saying this is it. For 4 decades since Reagan, it's been this progressive decline of workers' rights and income, and so this, I think, is a sign of what's going on here, where workers are saying, no, we deserve more recognition. We deserve what we need, which is the recognition that our services are important. Go into the story. So I have a blog. It started in 2008. This is an example of follow your bliss. I was looking at what was going on in the social media arena, and John August had this wonderful blog. He still does it. 2004 is when he launched it, johnaugust.com. But I saw a need. There wasn't like bloggers out there that were doing things on a daily basis, so that like writers could come and they turn on their computers. Let's start off the day by learning some news or inspiration about writing. So I started the blog in 2008. People ask me, well, why do you call it Go Into the Story? Well, that has a little anecdote to it. I was giving a bath, supervising a bath for my little boy, Luke, when he was like just turning 3. And the next day, I was going to start a new script that I was doing on spec that was different than my sort of comedy background. It was a little bit more dramatic. I was a little nervous about it. And so I jokingly said to Luke, hey, I'm starting this new project tomorrow. Do you have any advice for me? He didn't hesitate. He looked right at me, big blue eyes. He said, go into the story and find the animals.
Wow.
Brilliant.
And I thought at first, that's really funny. And then I walked away from it and I started to think about it. And I said, that's exactly right. That's what we do. As writers, we immerse ourselves in the lives of our characters. We go into the story. I call it receptive writing, where you're receiving all that stuff. And he's thinking, maybe birds and dogs, but the animals metaphorically are scenes and characters and lines of dialogue and moments and themes. And so I said, when I started the blog, that's the name, Go Into the Story. And it's been around for 15 plus years. And it is the official screenwriting blog on the Blacklist. And I averaged 3 million unique visits per year, and wow, I keep doing it.
Wow, that's great, isn't it?
Can anyone send a script into the Blacklist? It's open to for everyone.
Okay, the Blacklist is a little bit complex. It started off as like Franklin Leonard, who is a friend now. We've known each other for a decade and a half, and we're both huge, what you would call football fans. We call soccer. He's a big Chelsea fan. That's his thing. He's a big Chelsea guy.
Never mind.
But I know it's I just follow the U.S. men's national team and wherever they play. But Franklin started this thing when he was a development executive. He was going away around this time of year. He was going away saying, I'm reading all these lousy scripts. What are the best scripts that are out there? And so he sent out emails to all his development executive friends or whatnot. What are the best unproduced scripts? And they sent back their suggestions, and he simply totaled them up. Like, well, this script got 6 people. This script got 5 people saying it. And he created this little PDF, sent it out, and that was known as the Blacklist. That was like 2005. So that's where it started. Every year, it's coming up, second Monday in December, you'll see this year's Blacklist, which is a snapshot of the best unproduced screenplays in Hollywood. And it's become like a huge deal. In Hollywood, for those 2 hours when they're revealing the scripts, there's typically be like 70 or so that are on their list. Everybody's focused on it because it's like I don't know if you in England, you probably don't know. It's like a good housekeeping seal of approval. Like, yeah, these are really top notch scripts. Like Benedict Cumberbatch, when he was interviewed, said, "I would not have done The Imitation Game had it not been for the script being the number one script on the Blacklist." Or Meryl Streep said, "It was on the Blacklist, and so I agreed to read the script." So that's where it got started. But then they've evolved now. They have a website where you can upload anybody, anywhere, can upload a script to this website, and there are people who read it and give it a review. But then on the other side, there's like 3,000 plus people who are in the industry who can then read these scripts and access these scripts. And they have all these little things you can do if you're a writer, where you say the genre, the budget, the female-centric lead, the log line, and all that stuff, so that there's you can put in all these facts and whatnot to specify the type of material you want. And as a result of it, they've had hundreds and hundreds of writers who've gotten representation. They've had people discover scripts that they then turned into movies. So that's a big part of the thing. They also now produce movies. So the Blacklist is this much more complex thing now. But yeah, there is the website where anybody can upload their script and see if they can get people interested in it. And so that's a big deal now. It's no longer you no longer have to be the son or daughter of a mogul, like a movie mogul. You no longer have to go to USC or NYU to get access. You no longer have to know somebody who is the second cousin of someone who slept with someone who is someone in Hollywood. You can just upload the script and see what happens. And so the access part of it is much more open nowadays than it used to be.
Yeah, more open-ended. Yeah.
Brilliant. I was going to ask, since our last chat, you've published the best-selling screenwriters, the Bible, the thing I'm advertising behind me, The Protagonist's Journey, an introduction to character-driven screenwriting and storytelling. So tell us about the book. Number one bestseller on Amazon for screenwriters?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So this all started with a London-based publishing company, Palgrave Macmillan. They're part of Springer, which is the largest publishing company or outfit of textbooks in the world. And so I was in conversations with them. They approached me because of my, I don't know why, because of the blog and social media and whatnot. And we were having conversations about what I could maybe write. And I was like, well, do we really need another screenwriting book? Seriously, there's so many out there. I haven't read any of them. I only read one, Sid Field's book, the screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting. That was back in 1986. I've never read any of them. I own a bunch of them. People send me these books, but I just, I don't need to do that. Anyhow, they said to me, Scott, well, why don't you do a little research on what books film schools are using? I said, okay, well, that makes sense. I teach in a film school, so maybe I should do that. And I looked around and I was like, wow. There's, first of all, some of the books that they're using in like graduate school are like books that I know from reputation, maybe 10th graders should use. They like start to understand the basics and rudiments of screenwriting. And moreover, nobody that I could tell was promoting books that dealt with the single most important aspect of writing, in my view, which is the characters, right? And so I said, okay, well, maybe then I should do something. And so I had no intention of writing this, none. And it was really hard. I mean, it took me 21 months during like the COVID thing, where I was going down to my office every day and the dreary, bleak, period of time where I was writing this. It's not like writing a screenplay where it's like, oh, I've got these characters. 2 pages and just sort of feel, but no, it's like footnotes and research and 300 movies and TV references and analysis. And moreover, I said, I don't want to write a textbook. I want to write a book that's like readable and enjoyable. And the people will get that when I talk about the protagonist journey, yes, it's informative about movies and TV, but you know what? It's informative about our lives. Each one of us is on our own protagonist journey. Each one of us is the protagonist on our journey. So I slaved over every line over and over again. How can I make this readable? How can I make this evocative and engaging so that people feel something and don't just think about what they're reading? So it took me 21 months and I wrote it, and I'm glad I did. And I'll never write another book like that again because that was so hard. But you know what? I keep getting, like, just literally 5 minutes before our conversation, there was a tweet from Matthew Cherry, he won an Academy Award for a short film called Hair Love. It's a beautiful film, and then that's inspired a TV series that he did called Young Love. Anyhow, he said, I can't quote it, but he was like, I love this book. This book really caused me to rethink the way that I think about screenwriting and so forth. I keep getting these comments from people. It seems to have connected with folks. And I'm not surprised, because this is how we engage stories, is connect the stories, is the characters. You know, I have a mantra that I start the book with and I end the book with. It's begin with character, end with character, find the story in between. Let the characters drive the process, as opposed to a lot of these how-to books, which is, well, this needs to happen on page 25 and the break it back to here. No, yes, plot's important, but you got to go through the characters to get to that. So I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell. I mean, you know, this is what I've been teaching for decades and using my own writing. So yeah, the book is done well. It was the #1 book on Amazon in film and TV for like 7 months, and it keeps. I just got emailed this week from a publishing company in France. They want to talk to me about translating it into French.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Oui, monsieur.
Oui.
I mean, you've written your own screenplays, and but do you also offer consultancy work, critiquing, advising on new and established writers' work? It's a bit different to writing an advice thing about it, isn't it? Do you do anything like that as a sideline?
Well, I do teach at DePaul, obviously. I teach undergraduates and graduate students. I'm just entering the final. We're in a quarter system. The final quarter of my 6th MFA thesis group, where they're writing their thesis script. So I've worked with, I don't know, nearly 100, I guess, of those students there. But I do have an online educational resource. I started with Tom Benedict. Tom was the first screenwriter I met in Hollywood. He's the brother of my first agent, Peter Benedict. Tom and I created this online screenwriting and writing resource, educational resource, back in 2010. It's called screenwritingmasterclass.com. And both of us come from a character perspective. You know, we bring that to bear. So I do teach online classes through that site as well. I don't do consultations like, you know, there are these consultants and stuff very frequently. Although I have been involved with an outfit out of Montreal. They're called Lafite Films, Fete, with that little triangle over the, I don't know French.
Yeah.
But they want to do live action Pixar movies. And I'm a huge Pixar fan, and I won't get into it. But anyhow, they discovered me and asked me to come on board to help with them. And I was just recently up in Montreal for 2 days on set for a movie that I worked a lot with them on as a story consultant. And that was so great. It's a wonderful family film. It's a live action film. It's going to come out I think they're going to release it in November 2024. It's got a little Christmas theme to it, so it's like a holiday thing. But they have asked me to continue on to do some story consultations with them. So I'll do that. But on an individual basis, it's really hard. I don't have a lot of time, you know.
Yeah.
I now do this thing like this year. I'm going to Europe again for the fourth time this year, to Geneva for a 2-day presentation, and then Paris for a 3-day presentation in December. I leave on December 4th. So I do these things. I've done them I'm going back to London. It looks like in the spring of 2024 for the London Screenwriters Festival, but England and Germany and Spain and France and Switzerland, and so I'm very busy between teaching and writing and doing these presentations. So I don't have time to do those individual consultations, but I do work with companies like Lafayette, and I'm happy to do story consultations with them. Yeah.
The main one that I've been looking forward to, the last chat we had, you gave me a brilliant, bent my mind, to be honest, breakdown of the Wizard of Oz film, of the Trickster character, things like that.
Oh yeah.
Could you give us another breakdown of character development, say from the Silence of the Lambs, which I watched again the other night? Cruise with Age with me.
Great film.
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs. Well, that's one of my favorite movies. Of course, that was one of 3 movies that won the Big Five: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Screenplay. The other 2 being It Happened One Night, the 1934 film, and then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So the Silence of the Lambs really fits into what I talk about. In fact, I feature it in my book. So you've got these primary characters. Let's go through them. There's Clarice Starling, Jack Crawford, who, Clarice Starling's an FBI agent in training. Jack Crawford is the head of the behavioral science unit that actually, based on a real life character, the behavioral science unit at the FBI was where you got that whole thing where they would go and interview serial killers and, figure them out. And then they'd start doing profiling. So they'd come out of cases and they'd figure out, well, because of this, and this, the style of the killings that are going on, we can say that the individual is probably like this, adult male, white van with no, that sort of thing. So Jack Crawford's based on a real life character, and he's the figure who invites Clarice in, saying, I've got an interesting, I don't think he says opportunity, but I got an interesting errand for you to do. I want you to go meet this guy, Hannibal Lecter, and just talk to him. And we have these questions we want to ask, So then there's Hannibal Lecter, of course, a psychopath. He's imprisoned at the beginning in some sort of psychiatric prison situation in Baltimore. They're all trying to find this current serial killer his nickname Buffalo Bill.
Yeah,
James Gum. He's got various names, but Buffalo Bill is currently out there. He's kidnapping women and killing them. And they're finding these bodies with some skin parts that have been cut out. And so they don't know what that's all about, but we find out as we go forward. Then there's Catherine Martin. She's the latest kidnapping victim. She's the daughter of a United States senator. And so she's the latest kidnapping victim. And then there's Dr. Frederick Chilton. He's the head of the psychiatric prison where Lecter is. And so, okay. So if you look at those characters, first of all, this is the big point, is like, of all the people in the world that Jack Crawford would choose to do this little interesting errand, it's Clarice Starling. Her father was a law enforcement agent in West Virginia, like a marshal or something, a deputy. And her mother had died, so she was a single parent. Her father, we see 2 flashbacks in the movie. The first flashback, she's creeping up on her dad as he comes home from work. She leaps into his arms and she says, "Did you catch any bad guys today, Daddy?" Right? So right there, you understand, she gets it.
Yeah.
And he says, "No, I don't, I didn't. Clarice, good to see you." The second flashback you see is her in a funeral home where she imagines and remembers where she's approaching her father's open casket and saying goodbye to him. Her father was killed by two guys randomly. He caught two guys in a store boosting a TV, and they shot and killed him. So of all the people in the world that Jack Crawford could pick, he picks Clarice Starling to do this thing. She is, in my language system, in a state of disunity. You know, why did she go and sign up for the FBI, the behavioral science unit? Well, in my view, she's trying to understand the nature of evil. That's what killed her father, was evil. These two guys, they're like the boogeyman, right? And so she has these nightmares because when she, after her father died, she was sent to a Montana ranch, like from a cousin, and she witnessed a horrific thing, this slaughter of the spring lambs. And she took a lamb and tried to run away with it to save the lamb. So she has these horrific experiences that she doesn't want to deal with. She doesn't want to talk about the trauma of that. She hears the crying, the screaming of the lambs in these nightmares. That's her unconscious trying to poke through. Yeah. So of all the people in the world, Jack Crawford picks Clarice Starling to go meet, of all the people in the world, a psychopath who happens to be a trained psychiatrist. So if there's anybody in the world,
you couldn't make it up, could you?
Right? It's like, that's what I call the narrative imperative. It's like Joseph Campbell says, the journey that the hero takes is the journey they need to take. This is exactly the journey that Clarice needs to take. She cannot move forward in her life unless she deals with this background stuff. And the perfect person for her to force her to deal with it is Lecter, because Lecter holds this trump card over her. You want clues to Buffalo Bill? I can give you clues to Buffalo Bill, but first, quid pro quo. I'll give you clues. You tell me things about yourself, right? So they make this deal. Even when Jack Crawford said, you don't want to let Lecter get inside your head. And exactly that. She goes in, right? Because part of her understands instinctively. I mean, she's trying to save Catherine Martin, the kidnapping victim. She's trying to find Buffalo Bill, but there's an instinct inside that's unspoken. She knows she needs to deal with this stuff. And so she's drawn toward Lecter to force her, even though it's painful, to go into herself. Campbell says the outer journey of the hero's journey is really incidental. That's a direct quote, to the inner journey. So Clarice's, there's the plot. Yeah, they're trying to find Buffalo Bill and save Catherine Martin. But really what it's about is the inner journey, where she has to go in and deal with the trauma of her father's death and what happened on that Montana farm. So per my language system, the structure I have, I talk about these 5 primary character archetypes: protagonist, nemesis, attractor, mentor, trickster, right? The protagonist is Clarice. The nemesis is not Hannibal Lecter. He's a psychopath. He's known for, like, he's Hannibal the cannibal. He like eats his victims. He's an awful guy, but he's not the nemesis. The nemesis is Buffalo Bill. She needs to go
together.
That's the final struggle, is Buffalo Bill. You know, true. Hannibal Lecter, he escapes at the end of Act 2. Act 3 is about Clarice going to find Buffalo Bill in the final struggle, where they're aiming guns at each other. So he's the nemesis. He represents the two guys who killed their father. He represents the boogeyman. He represents evil. He's the nemesis, right? Lecter is the mentor. He's the guy that leads Clarice into herself. You must tell me now, he says to her, you know. He, remember when he first meets her, you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes. You look like a rube. Right off the bat, he understands that she's in a state of disunity. He gets it right off the bat, right? So he's the mentor figure. The attractor character, the character that speaks most to the emotional life of Clarice, is Catherine Martin, the kidnapping victim. She's a young woman, just like Clarice. She's from the South, just like Clarice. She's being victimized by Buffalo Bill, just like Clarice was when her father was killed, right? So Lecter says to her, you think if you can save poor Catherine Martin, you can stop the awful crying of the lambs, right? He says that to her directly. And she says, I don't know. What he doesn't say to her is, Clarice, I'm awfully sorry to say you're going to have to blow away Buffalo Bill, because that's a redemptive act. By killing Buffalo Bill, she in some ways redeems herself for what happened to her father by shedding the blood. When she grabs that lamb and runs away, she's trying to save her father. Her father was an innocent lamb who was slain. It's like religious language, right? And so Buffalo Bill, when she sheds his blood, it's like Old Testament stuff. She's shedding a blood as a sacrifice to redeem herself for what happened with her father. So that's the Attractor character, Catherine Martin, right? If it had only been about her saving Catherine Martin, if you remember in the movie, she finds Catherine Martin and down in the pit. And then she says, "You just wait right there. I'll be right back."
Yeah.
And off she goes to find Buffalo Bill. So it's not just about saving Catherine Martin. She knows she's got to go take care of Buffalo Bill. There are two Trickster characters. Tricksters are enemy, ally, ally, enemy. They shift from side to side. Frederick Chilton is clearly one. He's the head of the psychiatric hospital. Like literally, he's an ally and that he's going to help Clarice go to meet Lecter. But like when they're first meeting, he's hitting on her. You know, Baltimore could be kind of a fun place to go out. And like he was trying to get on a date. He plants a tape recording device, which he takes Lecter away from her and down to Memphis. So there's this, trickster. And then Jack Crawford. Jack Crawford is a trickster because he's totally using Clarice. He knows that Lecter will be attracted to her. There are times where, like in the funeral home, where he's telling the head sheriff all these guys are around because there's the latest victim. They're having an autopsy. He says, let's go talk in private. So he's a total trickster character. So those are the archetypes. But the point is that this is the journey that she took, is the journey she needed to take. Clarice needed to go on this in order to come to some sense of wholeness toward the end of the movie. So that's my little sermonette. I hope that makes sense. So if you look at indigenous cultures throughout history, all around the world, the trickster is a really important figure, often represented like in the Native American traditions, the indigenous cultures here in North America. The coyote, or the fox, they're shifty, they're tricky, right? You don't know if you can trust them or not, but they're important because, once you leave the security of your tribe and you go out into the world, you got to be able to discern who's an enemy, who's an ally. Like, you're going to be tested. And tricksters are great because in storytelling, because they make that point, which is, okay, the people out there are not like the people you know. And so you got to be able to discern, is that someone I can trust or someone I can't trust? And so tricksters are shapeshifters. Yeah. They test the will of the protagonist. Sometimes they're allies, sometimes they're enemies, right? So like in Star Wars 4, that's Han Solo. Han Solo is he doesn't believe in the Force and whatnot, and he's just doing it for money. And he leaves before the Death Star thing, and then he shows back up, enemy, ally, ally, enemy, right? Wizard of Oz, I think we talked about that before, but the Professor Marvel is a trickster, the Wizard of Oz himself, the Toto is a trickster, right? So, they're kind of some. So, that's a very important archetype, particularly in indigenous cultures, just to make sure that when you're training and teaching the young people, you can't just trust people. You got to be able to discern, like, who you trust and who you don't trust. So, but let me zip to Silence of the Lambs here. Okay. So this is the thing I tell my students, and we do this like at DePaul and through Screenwriting Masterclass, comments in my book, this idea of switch protagonist. You're not literally saying, all right, Clarice is the protagonist of the Silence of the Lambs. Yeah. I'm not saying in this exercise that you would say, oh, okay, Lecter is the protagonist or whatever. No, I'm saying that you want to look at them as if they were the protagonist, because as far as Hannibal Lecter is concerned, he is the protagonist in his story. Buffalo Bill, he's the protagonist in his story, right? Yeah. So there's a great exercise you can do where you go through the entire story and you think about, all right, I'm going to look at the mentor figure, but as if they're the protagonist. I'm going to look at the world through their eyes. and I'm going to do an entire pass where I'm just looking at the story through their eyes. And the same thing with all these major characters. Well, so here's a great example of this. In The Silence of the Lambs, we've got these 5 archetypes, right? And you got Clarice is the protagonist, Buffalo Bill's the nemesis, Catherine Martin's the attractor, Hannibal Lecter's the mentor, and then you got 2 tricksters. You got Chilton and Crawford, right? So that's the way that it plays out. But what if we switched protagonists and looked at the world through Lecter's eyes as the protagonist? Well, who's his nemesis? It's Chilton, Alex Chilton, the guy who keeps him in, who tortures him by beaming in, takes all his photos and drawings and stuff from the walls, beams in this like obnoxious televangelist, loud volumes. That's why at the very end, I'm going to have dinner with an old friend. He's going to go whack, Chilton, right? Because that's his nemesis character.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so who's his attractor? Clarice.
Yeah.
Clarice.
They'll say we were lovers.
They'll say we were. I think it would be very interesting to, So she's the attractor. Well, who's his mentor? It's Buffalo Bill. He's using the clues that he's extracting from the information they provide him, the FBI, about Buffalo Bill. Of course, he even knew the guy beforehand. He was a client, and so he's using those clues to augment his escape. And who's the trickster? It's Crawford. He knows that Crawford is like, they're going to give him a stay on Anthrax Island, and he knows that Crawford's using Clarice. So Crawford is a trickster to him. Now, what if we then looked at the world through the eyes of Buffalo Bill as the protagonist? This is a great exercise where you take your nemesis and say, all right, I'm going to think about them as being the protagonist. You want to humanize your nemesis as much as possible, even if they're the bad guy. Like that, there's that great quote, even bad guys have moms, right? So, if you can find the human element in a nemesis character, that makes for a much more complex psychological dynamic for the audience. Like, oh, you know what? I can relate to that. And so Buffalo Bill, his problem is he thinks his issue is that he wants to be a woman. So, he's been, at the time, they called them sex change operations. There were 3 of them in the world. They rejected his applications. So he didn't have any recourse. So in his mind, because he's very good with sewing, he's a psychopath, but logically he's like, all right, I'll kidnap women. I'll starve them for a few days so their skin gets slack. Then I'll kill them and I'll cut out the skin parts and I'll sew them together into a female skin suit. Again, not, he's a psychopath, but there's a certain kind of logic in that. And if you step back a little bit and you say, you know what? The guy feels misunderstood. The guy feels like an outsider. Well, all of us have had experiences like that, right? So if you look at the world through Buffalo Bill's eyes, there's a bit of empathy, not sympathy, but a bit of empathy where you go, oh, okay, I get it. So who's his nemesis? Clarice. Clarice is trying to save Catherine Martin, the final shootout. That's Clarice. His nemesis is Clarice. Who is his attractor character? Remember that crazy dance he does in front of the video?
Oh, yeah.
He puts on the wig. He sticks his penis in between his legs and stands out there with the moth wings, like that. That's the female ideal that he yearns to be. He wants to be a woman. He wants to be female. And so when he does that dance, it ends with the whole looking like a vagina thing, where he sticks his penis between his legs. That's who he wants to be. That's his emotional connection, is to be a female. Who is the mentor? It's moths. Lecter says, moths, transformation, right? From pupa into the... And so he has moths all around. There's moth images. There's like literally moths in his house. And at one point, right before Clarice shows up, he's down pulling a moth out of a cocoon and he's going, so beautiful, so powerful. It represents transformation. He wants to transform from being a male into a female. So the moth is a mentor, that idea of transformation, the potential. The moth represents that. And then the trickster is Catherine Martin, because at first she's an ally because he's going to use her. He's going to kill her and get her skin suit. But she gets the dog down there. She's got his dog. get me out there. And I'm going to kill your dog, mister. Right. By the way, you learn so much about the movie when you see it over and over. There's all these things. I just saw something on Twitter the other day. You remember when we first meet Clarice, she's running in the woods, and she's climbing up a rope, and there's a sign there that says pain. So this is part of the FBI training thing. You've got to overcome your pain, right? Well, there's another rope scene in the movie where Buffalo Bill's lowering like this bucket to Catherine Martin. And when she has the dog, what does he say? You don't know what kind of pain you're in. The word pain. The rope thing. I don't know. So anyhow, this is a thing you can do as a writer. You can take every one of your characters and go through and do what I call a protagonist pass, where you're going to look at each character in every scene and think about them as the protagonist. They're not. The protagonist is the protagonist. The other characters are not, but in their experience, they are. And so if you do that, you're just going to deepen your understanding and enrich these characters, more complex and interesting and engaging to an audience. So that's my little spiel on Switch Protagonist. I think I probably said everything I need to say about Silence of the Lambs, other than it's just an awesome film.
It is. That's a brilliant analysis. I've really enjoyed that.
Absolutely fascinating. Incredible.
But Scott, time's caught up with us. It's really appreciate your time. It's I could listen to you chatting about movies all day and night.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just so fascinating. Yeah. Brilliant.
But for now, Scott, thank you very much.
Great. I enjoyed. Anytime I can talk about this stuff, I just want to go to the point. We need storytellers now more than ever. And we need storytellers who are willing to engage their characters and allow the characters to drive that process, because that's where empathy occurs. When we meet characters on screen and we go, you know what, I can identify with them. They have a different skin color than me. They have a different gender identity than me. They've got a different religious belief than me, but you know what? I can relate to them on a human level, one-to-one, because of this thing, this empathy. And the way to do that is through your characters. And then moreover, they just drive the story, So thanks for having me on. I'm happy to have an opportunity to preach that lesson.
That's been absolutely wonderful.